Good morning. This is called the Devil's Bridge, and it'd be a heck of a place for a sword fight.
Sword of the Stranger.
Sword of the Stranger is an action anime set in historical Japan, probably around 1600. A young boy, Kotaro, is fleeing from some warriors out to capture him. He hopes to make it to a Buddhist temple where he hopes to be safe. The poor kid only has his loyal dog to keep him company on this journey. Luckily, the dog is both pretty smart and handy in a fight. It turns out Kotaro's pursuers are a small band of Chinese warriors sent to Japan by the Ming Emperor to capture the kid because of some prophecy. They brought a handful of super swordsmen and women to lead their emperor's search and hired a bunch of Japanese soldiers from a local warlord to help. They also hired a lot of local workers to build an unusual construction project for them. The Ming won't tell the locals why they're building this strange thing or why they want the kid, but it's clear they have a deadline and they're willing to spend a lot of gold to meet it. While Kotaro's hiding in an abandoned shrine, he meets a wandering swordsman, a man with no name. When some of the Ming searchers find Kotaro's new home, the nameless swordsman proves to be pretty slick with his sword himself. Not that he actually draws his blade, mind you. He's tied a peace knot around his blade and refuses to draw steel. It turns out, if you're really good, you don't need any points or sharp edges. The sheath works just fine. Kotaro hires the man with no name to take him to the temple. Their relationship is interesting. Kotaro is both desperately in need of help and distrustful of anyone who'd offer it. His reluctant swordsman companion, haunted by nightmares from his own past, seems unwilling to care about anything. This is one of those super warrior stories where one great swordsman or swordswoman can slaughter dozens of ordinary soldiers without breaking a sweat. We learn this early on when a small Ming force is ambushed on the road by some bandits. The Ming seem impervious to pain, practically ignoring the arrows the bandits shoot. They just send a single swordsman out to dispose of their attackers. That elite swordsman is a foreigner, a tall, blonde-haired, blue-eyed mercenary named Luo Lang.
区区数人，罗朗大人无意对付。
As you can see, these sword fights are really well animated. The art and animation is by the Bone Studio, and they've done a nice job using modern computer-assisted graphics with hand-drawn artwork. They may not have the budget that an Otomo or Oshii commands, but this is a bona fide theatrical film, not some dressed-up OVA. If director John Ford defined the American Western, it was Italian director Sergio Leone and his star and disciple Clint Eastwood, who elevated the Old West showdown to a high art. Interestingly, in all those so-called spaghetti westerns, Eastwood plays a man with no name himself. In the big showdowns, opponents don't just draw their guns, they stare. They flex their hands. They stare some more. The wind blows dust down the street, and all the while the music of Ennio Morricone keeps raising the tension. But with a gunfight, once they draw, it's over. With a sword fight, once they draw, the fun is just getting started. This is Masahiro Ando's debut film as director, though he's done plenty of storyboards and keys in the past. He's done a great job composing his major sword fights here, integrating intense anticipation of Leone with the furiously paced gymnastic animated sword fight, and placing those battles in interesting location where the terrain can add to the excitement. Composer Naoki Sato has provided some appropriately dramatic music to highlight that tension and excitement. But there's more than Sword of the Stranger than just sword fights. This is an action flick, but it isn't a simple story of just the kid fleeing for some bad guys. Fumihiko Takayama, who directed Gundam 0080 and the Pat Labor W13 videos, embellished this story with plenty of detail. I like the way he drops small hints about the nameless warrior's past, and I also enjoyed his appreciation for horses as something more than a feudal version of a jeep. He also expanded the cast with some key secondary characters. Both the Japanese warlords are curious about why these Ming have come to their land for this strange project, and while the locals are happy to take the Chinese gold, they aren't unquestioning allies. Both the Chinese and Japanese are wary of each other, and neither is without dissent within their own ranks. Lastly, the Buddhist monks who sheltered Kotaro in the past have some turmoil among themselves about the kid. A good action story needs a good villain. The foreign swordmaster, Luo Lang, doesn't really fit the classic definition of evil. He's not even the leader of the Ming forces, and he doesn't get nearly as much screen time as the protagonists. But they've made the most of the time he gets. He remains one-dimensional, but it's a really interesting one-dimension, and I love it when he smiles. For a finale, we get both a clash of ideals, a battle of small armies, and a couple of solid individual showdowns among rivals. I found the dramatic climax was worth skipping back a couple of chapters to watch over again. I really enjoyed the ending. I give Sword of the Strangers 4.5 stars. This is a solid action yarn with a satisfying conclusion. It's not a unique or innovative movie, but it does a good job combining the familiar into an exciting story. I thought Bandai's English dub was okay, but the Japanese voices match the characters better for me. The Chinese characters sometimes speak in Chinese, though when they have long conversations, they usually lapse into Japanese, for audience convenience, I assume. Both Japanese and Chinese dialogue are subtitled. Bandai's English soundtrack keeps the Chinese dialogue tracks with subtitles. Now, please excuse the following rant. I've bought a lot of DVDs in the past decade, some imported from Japan, some from U.S. anime companies, and plenty of U.S. domestic releases too. Of all those, I've received maybe a handful that were defective right out of the box and wouldn't play, and every one of them has been from Bandai. Again, my Sword of the Stranger DVD had to go back for a replacement before I could watch it. But is it with Bandai that they can't press a DVD properly?
Thanks for listening.